The words cut through the sanctuary like broken glass. "Security. Please escort that woman out." 200 guests froze. The gospel quartet went silent mid-verse. Camera phones lifted, capturing the moment a daughter drew a line her mother could never uncross. The bride stood at the altar in cascading ivory silk, her bouquet trembling in her grip. Her voice was steady, cold, final. Across the aisle, a woman in a faded lavender dress clutched her purse to her chest. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Just a whisper that barely reached the first pew. "Baby, it's me. Your mama." The security guards moved forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Somewhere in the chaos, a camera shutter clicked. That single frame would travel faster than mercy, further than forgiveness, into the phones and screens of millions who would judge without knowing, condemn without context, and share without stopping to ask the one question that mattered most. What could make a daughter do this? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Within 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 30 million times. Hashtags multiplied. Think pieces appeared in major publications. Strangers on the internet became judge and jury, dissecting clips as if it contained the entire truth of 2 lifetimes compressed into one cruel moment. But viral videos never tell the whole story. They capture reactions, not reasons. They freeze time at the climax and ignore the years of buildup, the fractures beneath the surface, the small compromises that eventually lead to catastrophic choices. Who was the woman being removed? What history existed between mother and daughter that could justify such public rejection? And what could transform a bond once unbreakable into something a bride could sever in front of God and 200 witnesses? The answers require going back. Past the polished wedding photos and designer gown. Past the engagement announcements in glossy magazines and the carefully curated social media presence. Back to a cramped apartment in South Atlanta where a young mother made a promise under flickering fluorescent lights, a vow that would shape everything that followed. Tamara Johnson was 22 when she became a mother. The father had been a summer romance, a collection of promises that evaporated the moment the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. But Tamara didn't crumble. She stood in that tiny bathroom, hand pressed against her still flat stomach, and made a declaration that would become her North Star for the next quarter century. "You're going to have everything I didn't. Every single thing." She meant it with every cell in her body. Tamara grew up in foster care, bouncing between homes that treated children like temporary inconveniences. She aged out of the system at 18 with $200, a garbage bag full of clothes, and a high school diploma she'd fought tooth and nail to earn. She knew hunger. She knew cold. She knew what it meant to be invisible in a world that only noticed you when you became a problem. Her daughter would never know those things. Tamara worked 3 jobs during those early years. She cleaned office buildings before dawn, answered phones at a call center during the day, and waited tables at a diner most evenings. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Her hands developed calluses that never fully healed. But every sacrifice had purpose. Every dollar saved went toward a future she could see clearly in her mind, even when exhaustion made her vision blur. She named her daughter Jasmine. A flower that blooms at night, resilient and fragrant, beautiful against all odds. The apartment they shared was small but immaculate. Tamara might not have had much, but what she had, she kept with pride. She taught Jasmine to read using library books checked out. She cooked meals that stretched ingredients across multiple days, flavoring poverty with creativity and love. On Sunday mornings, they attended Greater Hope Baptist Church, where Tamara sang in the choir and Jasmine learned that faith could be both shield and sustenance. As Jasmine grew, so did Tamara's ambitions for her. She enrolled her daughter in every program the community center offered. She found scholarships for summer camps. When Jasmine showed aptitude in math, Tamara somehow found the money for tutoring. When the guidance counselor at the public school suggested Jasmine could qualify for a magnet program across town, Tamara didn't hesitate. She rearranged her entire work schedule to make the commute possible, spending hours on buses so her daughter could access better opportunities. The investment paid off. Jasmine thrived academically. She earned straight A's, joined the debate team, became student council president. College acceptances arrived in thick envelopes, each one representing a door Tamara had forced open through sheer determination and sacrifice. When Jasmine received a full scholarship to Emory University, Tamara wept in the church parking lot, overcome by gratitude and the knowledge that her promise was being kept. But success requires transformation, and transformation often creates distance. College introduced Jasmine to a world her mother had never accessed. She studied business and economics, learning languages of capital and commerce that felt foreign on her tongue at first but gradually became fluent. She joined organizations where casual conversations referenced vacation homes and trust funds. She made friends who'd never worried about utility bills or chosen between buying groceries and paying rent. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, shame began to take root. It started small. Jasmine stopped inviting college friends to the apartment, making excuses about studying at the library or grabbing coffee near campus instead. When classmates asked about her family, she offered vague responses, editing out the specifics of her mother's jobs and their neighborhood. During holiday breaks, she felt increasingly aware of the gap between her two worlds, the dissonance between the life she was building and the life that had built her. Tamara noticed the shifts but said nothing. She told herself it was natural for children to grow, to evolve, to create identities separate from their parents. She ignored the ache in her chest when Jasmine spent entire visits scrolling through her phone, distracted by a social sphere Tamara couldn't see or access. She pretended not to notice when her daughter corrected her grammar or stiffened when she spoke too loudly in public spaces. Love sometimes means watching someone you raised become someone you barely recognize, and hoping the foundation you laid is strong enough to bring them back when they're ready. After graduation, Jasmine landed a position at a prestigious consulting firm in Buckhead. The salary seemed impossible to Tamara, who still calculated her worth in hourly wages and overtime shifts. Jasmine moved into a sleek apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She bought furniture that matched, clothes with labels that meant something, shoes that cost more than Tamara's monthly grocery budget. She also changed her name. Not legally but socially. Jasmine became Jazz, which sounded sophisticated in business meetings and cocktail conversations. Jazz Johnson had a carefully crafted backstory that smoothed rough edges, omitted uncomfortable details, and positioned her as someone who'd always belonged in rooms where wine cost more than most people's dinners. Then she met Ryan Thompson. Ryan came from old Atlanta money, the kind that didn't announce itself but didn't need to. His family owned property across 3 counties and a portfolio of investments that generated wealth while they slept. He was handsome in an effortless way, educated at private schools and Ivy League universities, fluent in the social codes that separated inherited privilege from earned success. Their courtship moved quickly. Expensive dates and weekend trips were the norm. Ryan's mother, Catherine, took immediate interest in the relationship. She was a woman who'd spent her life chairing nonprofit boards and organizing fundraisers, someone who believed presentation mattered more than substance and reputation could be cultivated like a garden. She liked Jasmine initially. The girl was polished, articulate, ambitious. But Catherine believed in thorough vetting, especially when family legacy was at stake. The investigation began casually. Lunch meetings where Catherine asked seemingly innocent questions about Jasmine's background. Conversations with mutual acquaintances who might know the Johnson family history. A private investigator whose report arrived in a manila envelope Catherine opened over morning coffee. What she discovered displeased her enormously. Catherine never said anything directly to Jasmine. She was too sophisticated for confrontation. Instead, she began dropping comments like carefully placed landmines. Observations about the importance of compatible backgrounds. Stories about other couples whose class differences eventually destroyed their marriages. Suggestions that some elements of one's past were better left in the past, especially during events where family would be scrutinized. Jasmine understood the subtext perfectly. The wedding planning became an exercise. Jasmine told Ryan her mother was sick, too ill to be heavily involved in preparations. She invented distant relatives to fill seats that would otherwise expose how small her family truly was. She selected a venue 2 hours outside Atlanta, far enough from her old neighborhood that worlds were unlikely to collide. Tamara sensed something wrong but couldn't name it. Her daughter had become increasingly distant, phone calls shorter and less frequent, visits practically non-existent. When Tamara asked about meeting Ryan's family, Jasmine always had excuses. Too busy with work. They traveled constantly. The timing wasn't right. The wedding invitation arrived in plain mail, no return address. Tamara held it like a sacred text, reading and rereading the elegant script. Her baby was getting married. Despite everything, despite the distance that had grown between them, this moment still mattered. This was still her daughter. She bought a dress at a consignment shop, spending money she didn't have on something appropriate for a formal wedding. She practiced her smile in the mirror, anticipating the moment she'd see Jasmine in her gown, beautiful and beloved. She bought a gift, a modest crystal vase she wrapped with care and hope. The morning of the wedding, Tamara took 3 buses to reach the venue. She arrived early, wanting to settle her nerves before the ceremony began. The church was magnificent, all soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that painted light across marble floors. Other guests arrived in luxury cars, dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than Tamara's monthly rent. She felt out of place but held her head high. She was the mother of the bride. She belonged here more than anyone. When Jasmine saw her mother enter the sanctuary, something inside her cracked. Not with love or relief but with panic. All her careful construction, the identity she'd built brick by brick, suddenly threatened by the woman in the second-hand dress carrying a gift wrapped in grocery store paper. Tamara represented everything Jasmine had been trying to outrun, every part of herself she'd attempted to bury beneath ambition and aspiration. Catherine was watching. Ryan's family filled the front pews. Cameras were positioned to capture every moment. This was supposed to be Jasmine's transformation complete, her final ascension into a world where her origins didn't matter. The decision happened in seconds. Rational thought surrendered to fear and shame so profound it felt like drowning. Jasmine walked toward her mother. Security personnel flanked her, summoned with a subtle gesture. Her voice when she spoke was cold, stripped of recognition or warmth. "You need to leave. You weren't actually invited." Tamara's face collapsed. Not with anger, but with devastation so complete it seemed to pull all air from the room. She reached out, hand trembling. "Baby, I'm your mother. I came to see you get married. I don't know who you are. Security, please remove this woman. She's making a scene." The guards moved forward. Guests gasped and whispered. Phones emerged from purses and pockets, recording history as it fractured. Tamara didn't resist. She simply stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking at the daughter she'd sacrificed everything for, searching for some flicker of the child she'd raised. She found nothing but a stranger wearing her daughter's face. As security escorted Tamara toward the exit, she turned back once. Her voice was barely audible above the chaos. "I love you, baby. I'll always love you. If you're still watching, type your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you." The video hit social media before the ceremony ended. Someone in the wedding party uploaded the footage with a caption designed for maximum virality. Within an hour, it had been shared thousands of times. By evening, major news outlets were covering the story. By the next morning, Jasmine's name and face were everywhere, attached to words like ungrateful, heartless, disgraceful. The internet became a courtroom where millions delivered verdicts without hearing testimony. Strangers located Tamara's social media accounts, which showed years of proud posts about her daughter's accomplishments. Old photos surfaced of Jasmine as a child, hugged close by a mother whose love was visible in every pixel. The contrast between those images and the wedding video created a narrative so damning that brands began distancing themselves from the bride immediately. Jasmine's employer received hundreds of emails demanding her termination. The wedding venue issued a statement condemning discrimination. Even Ryan's family, who'd indirectly encouraged the rejection, released carefully worded press releases about the importance of family values and respect. But the loudest voices were the anonymous ones. Comment sections filled with rage and disappointment. People who'd never met Tamara claimed her as their own mother, their grandmother, their aunt. They saw in her humiliation their own experiences of being judged for circumstances beyond their control, dismissed for lacking the right pedigree or presentation. Tamara herself remained silent. She went back to work the day after the wedding. Cleaned offices with the same diligence, answered phones with the same courtesy. When coworkers approached with sympathy or curiosity, she offered a small smile and changed the subject. She refused interview requests from dozens of media outlets eager to amplify her pain for ratings. She didn't post on social media or release statements or participate in the public trial of her daughter. When a local reporter finally tracked her down outside the diner where she still worked evening shifts, Tamara paused before responding. The camera captured her exhaustion, the weight of years visible in her shoulders and eyes. But her voice when she spoke was steady. "I love my daughter. That's all I want to say. I love her and I hope she remembers who she is." The clip went viral too, but for different reasons. People were struck by Tamara's grace, her refusal to weaponize her hurt or capitalize on her daughter's downfall. In a culture that rewards revenge and spectacle, her restraint felt revolutionary. Meanwhile, Jasmine's world was collapsing. The wedding ended early, guests departing in uncomfortable clusters. The honeymoon was canceled. Ryan's family suggested postponing any public appearances until the scandal died down. But scandals don't die. They evolve, mutate. Within weeks, Jasmine lost her job. The termination letter cited company values and public image concerns. Her friends stopped calling, unwilling to be associated with someone whose name had become synonymous with betrayal. Ryan grew distant, spending more time at his parents' estate, his texts becoming shorter and less frequent. The isolation was suffocating. Jasmine had spent years building a life she thought was secure, only to discover it was constructed from materials that dissolved under pressure. The people she'd impressed didn't actually know her. The world she tried to join didn't truly want her. And the person she'd become was someone she barely recognized when she looked in the mirror. 3 months after the wedding, another incident pushed Jasmine past the point of endurance. Catherine hosted a charity gala at the family estate. Jasmine attended despite her discomfort, desperate to prove she still belonged. During the evening, an expensive bracelet went missing from Catherine's bedroom. Security footage was reviewed. Suspicion immediately fell on Jasmine, the outsider, the girl whose background made her suspect regardless of evidence. Ryan didn't defend her. Not forcefully, not convincingly. He suggested maybe she'd taken it accidentally, confused it for her own jewelry, made an honest mistake. His doubt was the final betrayal, confirmation that she'd never truly been accepted, only tolerated. The bracelet was eventually found in a drawer where Catherine had misplaced it. No apology was offered to Jasmine. The damage was already done. That night, Ryan drove her back to their apartment in silence. When they arrived, he didn't turn off the car. "Maybe we moved too fast," he said, not looking at her. "Maybe we need some space to figure things out." Jasmine understood. Space was another word for ending. Figure things out meant he'd already decided. She packed a suitcase while he waited in the car. Everything she'd accumulated over the past years fit into 2 bags and a small box. The apartment that had seemed so perfect suddenly felt like a stage set, temporary and hollow. Ryan drove her to a hotel without speaking. When she got out, he finally looked at her. "I'm sorry it worked out this way. Sorry it worked out." As if their marriage had been a business venture that failed to meet projected returns. The hotel room was anonymous and cold. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. The social media accounts she'd carefully curated now felt like crime scenes, comments filled with people celebrating her downfall. She'd blocked thousands of accounts but couldn't outrun the consensus. She was the villain in a story millions had already decided. For the first time in years, she let herself remember. Not the edited version she'd presented to Ryan and his world, but the truth. Nights when her mother worked until dawn and still made breakfast before Jasmine left for school. The sound of gospel music playing softly in their tiny apartment. The way Tamara would quiz her on vocabulary words while folding laundry, making learning feel like play. Birthday cakes baked from scratch with ingredients that took weeks to budget for. The fierce pride in her mother's eyes at every graduation, every award ceremony, every small victory. She remembered the exact moment shame had first arrived. A college classmate had mentioned visiting Jasmine's home, and Jasmine had invented an excuse, suddenly aware of the threadbare couch and the kitchen table held together with duct tape. That first lie had felt necessary, protective. But lies multiply. One fabrication requires another to maintain the illusion. Eventually, she'd buried the truth so deeply she'd almost convinced herself it never existed. Almost. Jasmine opened her contacts, scrolling to a number she hadn't called in months. Her finger hovered over the name. Mama. Not mom or mother, but the familiar, tender word from childhood. She pressed call before courage could abandon her. The phone rang 4 times. Jasmine was about to hang up when she heard a click, then breathing. "Hello." Tamara's voice hit like a physical force. Jasmine's throat closed around words that wouldn't form. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything that had been broken and everything that might possibly be repaired. "Baby?" Tamara's voice cracked. "Is that you?" Jasmine managed a single word. "Mama." Then she was sobbing, years of accumulated grief and shame pouring out in a torrent. She tried to speak, to apologize, to explain, but words dissolved into incoherent sounds. On the other end, Tamara was crying too, her breath hitching with the force of emotions held too long. "Where are you?" Tamara asked when she could finally speak. "I don't know. A hotel. I have nowhere else to go. Give me the address. I'm coming to get you." "Mama, I don't deserve." "Address, baby. Right now." 40 minutes later, a 20-year-old sedan pulled into the hotel parking lot. Jasmine watched from the window as her mother emerged, wearing the same work uniform from years back. Tamara looked older, more tired, but when she glanced up at the building, searching for which room held her daughter, her face transformed with a love so fierce it crossed floors and walls. Jasmine met her at the entrance. They stood facing each other under fluorescent lights, two women separated by choices and united by blood. Tamara opened her arms. Jasmine walked into them, collapsing against her mother's shoulder like a child seeking shelter from a storm too large to weather alone. "I'm so sorry," Jasmine whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." Tamara held her tighter. "I know, baby. I know. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to fix any of it. We'll figure it out. But first let's go home." Home. The word carried weight Jasmine had forgotten. Not the apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, but the place where love lived regardless of square footage or zip code. How would you feel if you were in Jasmine's position? Let us know in the comments. The apartment hadn't changed. Same cramped kitchen, same worn furniture, same photographs on the walls documenting a childhood Jasmine had tried to outrun. But walking through the door felt different now. Not shameful but sacred. This was the space where someone had loved her unconditionally, before she'd learned to measure worth in dollars and appearances. Tamara made tea, the ritual automatic and comforting. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same one where Jasmine had done homework while her mother worked double shifts. Neither spoke for a long time, content to exist in each other's presence without the pressure of words. Finally, Jasmine broke the silence. "Why did you forgive me? After what I did, how could you even look at me?" Tamara wrapped her hands around her mug, considering the question carefully. "Because that's what mothers do. We love through the pain. We hold space for our children to make mistakes and find their way back. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. God knows it hurt terribly. But I never stopped being your mama, and you never stopped being my daughter. I became someone I don't even recognize. No, you became someone you thought you needed to be. That's different. The real you is still in there. She just got lost for a while." Jasmine shook her head. "I ruined everything. My job, my marriage, my reputation. Everyone hates me. And they should. I deserve all of it. Probably. But deserving punishment and needing grace aren't mutually exclusive. You did a terrible thing. But you're not a terrible person. You're a person who made terrible choices because you were afraid. Now you get to choose differently." The simplicity of the statement was revolutionary. Jasmine had been trapped in cycles of shame and defensiveness, unable to see a path forward because she couldn't forgive herself. But her mother's grace created space for something new, a possibility of redemption earned through action rather than claimed through words. The rebuilding started small. Jasmine found work at the diner where Tamara still waited tables. It paid minimum wage plus tips, a fraction of her former salary. Customers sometimes recognized her, whispered to their companions, took photos when they thought she wasn't looking. But she showed up every shift, worked hard, and slowly learned humility through service. She started therapy, unpacking the shame and fear that had driven her choices. She wrote letters she never sent, practicing accountability and self-awareness. She volunteered at the community center where her mother had enrolled her in programs years before, helping other kids access opportunities their families couldn't afford. The internet moved on to new scandals. The viral video faded from prominence. But Jasmine's real work was internal, invisible to cameras and comment sections. 6 months after returning home, she received an unexpected message. Ryan wanted to meet. Jasmine agreed, though she no longer felt anything toward him except a mild curiosity about the person she tried to become to please him. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory where neither held advantage. He looked uncomfortable, older somehow despite the short time since their separation. "I saw you're working at a diner," he said. "I am. That must be difficult after everything." "Actually, it's exactly what I needed." He studied her, confused by her lack of defensiveness. "I wanted to apologize for how things ended. My family, the pressure, I should have stood up for you better. You stood up exactly as much as you were capable of. I can't be angry about that. Besides, you would have been defending someone who didn't actually exist. I spent our entire relationship pretending to be someone I thought you wanted. That's not your fault. That's mine. So what now? Now I figure out who I actually am when I'm not performing for anyone. I'm working on being a better daughter, a better person. Everything else is secondary." They parted amicably, two people acknowledging a shared history that was never meant to become a future. That evening, Jasmine came home to find Tamara cooking dinner in their tiny kitchen. Gospel music played softly from a radio. The smell of cornbread filled the apartment. It was ordinary, unremarkable, perfect. "How was your shift?" Tamara asked. "Good. Tiring. My feet hurt." Tamara laughed. Welcome to the family business. They ate together, sharing stories from their day, comfortable in a routine that prioritized connection over impression. After dinner, Jasmine pulled out a notebook where she'd been writing. I'm thinking about going back to school, she said. Not business. Maybe social work. I want to help kids like I was, kids whose families are struggling but trying. Tamara's smile was radiant. That sounds beautiful, baby. It won't pay much. I won't have the kind of life I thought I wanted. But will it be the life you actually want? Jasmine considered the question, feeling certainty settle in her chest like returning home after a long journey. Yeah, Mama. I think it will. Jasmine's journey wasn't about public rehabilitation or winning back approval from strangers who judged her in minutes. It was about the harder, quieter work of becoming someone she could respect when she looked in the mirror. Someone her mother had always believed she could be, even when she'd forgotten it herself. Tamara's grace didn't erase what happened. Grace doesn't work that way. But it created space for transformation, for her daughter to grow back into herself through service and self-awareness. Love is powerful enough to forgive the unforgivable, patient enough to wait for return without demanding it. The wedding video still exists somewhere on the internet. Probably always will. But it no longer defines Jasmine's story. She's writing new chapters now, ones rooted in authenticity rather than aspiration, connection rather than performance. She still works at the diner. Still lives with her mother in that small apartment. Still faces occasional recognition from people who remember her as the heartless bride. But she meets their stares with quiet dignity, secure in an identity that can't be shaken by judgment because it's built on truth. Last Sunday they returned to Greater Hope Baptist Church together. Walked in side by side, Jasmine holding her mother's hand the way she had as a child. The congregation welcomed them with knowing smiles and gentle nods. People who understood that grace isn't about pretending harm never happened, but about believing in the possibility of becoming new. When the choir sang that morning, Jasmine heard the words differently. Songs about wandering and return. About being lost and found. About love that persists through betrayal and welcomes prodigals home. She looked at her mother beside her, eyes closed in worship, and felt gratitude so profound it brought tears. This woman had given her everything. Twice. First through sacrifice that made success possible, then through forgiveness that made redemption real. So here's the question we leave you with today. What would you have done? If you were Tamara, could you have forgiven your child? If you were Jasmine, would you have found your way back before it was too late? Tell us in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the courage to choose grace over grudges, connection over appearances, truth over temporary comfort. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe so you never miss our next video. Because real life is messier and more beautiful than any fiction, and every story contains seeds of hope if you're willing to look close enough. Next week, we're sharing another story that will challenge everything you think you know about loyalty, sacrifice, and the unexpected ways love transforms lives. Until then, remember, the people who raise you deserve more than your success. They deserve your presence, your honesty, your willingness to stay connected even when worlds pull you apart. See you in the next one.